Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I could not be more delighted to have the pleasure of interviewing Martha Hunt Handler, who is an environmentalist, a fierce wolf advocate, and the award-winning author of the beautifully written Winter of the Wolf, which is an Amazon bestseller and a Barnes & Noble top indie pick. Martha was raised in northern Illinois. She began to see wolves in her dreams from a very early age, and she has always understood that her role in this lifetime is to tell stories and be a voice for nature. After earning a degree in environmental conservation at UC Boulder, she worked as an environmental consultant in DC, San Francisco, and Los Angeles, and she is currently serving as the board president of the Wolf Conservation Center. The compelling Winter of the Wolf was inspired by the death of Martha's best friend's 12-year-old son, and 100% of Martha's author's proceeds go to supporting the Wolf Conservation Center. It tells the story of an empathic and spiritually evolved teenage girl named Bean, who sets out to discover the truth about the mysterious death of her beloved brother Sam, and finds herself on a personal journey of healing and self-discovery. The novel covers important themes such as suicide, grief, spirituality, humans' connection to nature, shamanism, and native Inuit culture. And the multifaceted Martha has also been a magazine columnist, an actress, and a polar explorer, among other occupations, and she's driven across the country in an 18-wheeler, and she was the grand prize winner of the Newlywed Game. I'm sure she's laughing because she didn't expect that in this interview to come out. I'm looking forward to talking with Martha, who spends her weekend. Actually, she spends her weekdays in Tribeca, New York, and her weekends near the Wolves in South Salem, New York, about the way Winter of the Wolf was inspired by the death of her best friend's 12-year-old son, what it was like to hear her friend's son's voice asking her to write a novel, Bean's journey of healing and self-discovery, the themes of suicide, grief, spirituality, humans' connection to nature, shamanism, and native Inuit culture that are included in the book, and more, for what will surely be a very thought-provoking and fascinating interview. Hi, Martha. A warm welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
I'm so excited to be here, and what an introduction. I am definitely blushing.
My pleasure. You know, I do this because I want everyone to know who they're listening to, what your credentials are, what you're all about. Everyone has their own story that gets them to where they are, and how we are sharing our stories with people. And speaking of a story, you've got quite a story about Miss Bean to share. But before we get there, let's find out what it was. You were brought up spiritually during your developmental years. I'm jealous. I didn't have any of that kind of thing. And how wonderful that happened for you. You want to describe what that was like for you?
Yeah, I feel very fortunate that I had a mother that was very open to it. Where she got it from, I'm not really sure. I don't really see that in the rest of her family, but she did Meals on Wheels, and we would always go to funerals together. As a little girl, she just always brought me as somebody to have next to her, and I could see the deceased spirit a lot.
Really? Wow.
It's really like
so cool.
They were laughing at what was being said about them. Other times they were shaking their head like that never happened, or it didn't happen like that. It was very funny. And so when we would leave, and I would say something like, well, Mr. Thompson was there, and she would question me. Like, it was never like, are you sure you're not losing it? Like, she just always encouraged me. What was the spirit saying? You doing okay?
She must have loved that you had that ability.
Yeah, she must have sensed it in some way. And then, so she was just really great that way. And then when I met one of my best friends, her mother was also that way and started having group sessions with a bunch of us starting in middle school. And they had just gone through the death of my best friend's little sister. And so we were channeling her and she was showing up in all these different ways. So there was no one to say, this is crazy. I only had positive affirmations that, of course, this is true. And of course, no one really dies. They're just not physically there for us. But
That is so wonderful that you got that at such an early age.
yeah, I feel very, very fortunate.
Wow, it took away the fear of death for you. It took away everything. I
Yes.
mean, what a blessing. So you began to see wolves in your dreams from a very early age. You want to
Yeah,
describe your dreams?
it
And did
was
they frighten you?
no, not at all. It was one black wolf, and more, this wolf was like leading me sometimes away from maybe a friend group that I had,
Ooh.
or always like into the woods when I was in confusing times. The wolf would kind of show me like just go back to nature and it'll settle down, it'll make sense again. And then as I got older, it was like showing me like don't go to this party, don't.
How would it show that to you?
It would be like go up to the door of where this party was going to take place, and then it would turn around and stare at me like you're not, this isn't
And
okay.
you could see this wolf and you could see it doing that
Yes.
in the periphery of your vision.
Yeah.
That is so cool. So you knew that the wolf was your totem animal. And how did you learn? I mean, you want to tell everyone what a totem animal is? And how did you figure that out?
I think it's just a lot of people have affinities towards animals, right? You go in their room and they've got elephants all over the place or pigs all over the place. And I think there's a reason for that. That animal for some reason is guiding you in some way and you need to figure it out. But for me, it was always the wolf, even though I'd never seen a wolf in real life. Yeah, they weren't in Illinois as far as I knew back then. So it was just this deep knowing that this animal has got something to teach me and I need to awake to that, whatever that is.
So would you say that most of us, all of us have totem animals? We just don't quite know what they are?
I think so. And I think if you meditated on it long enough, some animal would start coming through louder than other animals.
Interesting. So interesting. Why are wolves referred to as a keystone species, really? Because they have a vital role, but some people vilify them, right?
Yes, I highly recommend watching the very short YouTube video called How Wolves Change Rivers, and it's about the 1995 and 1996 reintroduction of wolves to Yellowstone. Yellowstone at the time had become kind of a wasteland because the only animals that were really there anymore were all the ungulates, anything with a hoof. So it was the bison, the deer, the elk, and without a top predator, they were just being overgrazing everything. So no tree saplings could start growing. So the forests were all disappearing. The water wasn't going into rivers anymore. It was just meandering all over because there weren't any trees to keep it into its bank. And this is when they knew like it was really serious. These animals were taking over. Their numbers were way too much. It couldn't be supported by the land anymore. And they brought in wolves, and very quickly, so many other animals came back. First of all, it got rid of all the sick, big animals because that's what it's going to go after is just the older ones, the ones that are diseased, the ones that are injured. So their numbers started getting a lot more reasonable. And then when they would take out like an elk, there were so many animals that could eat on that animal, and they had all disappeared and they started coming back. So like the badgers and the muskrats, and then you had the songbirds that started coming back because there was trees again. And so it's just this huge trickle down effect to the point that the river started going back into the riverbanks. And it was like kind of everyone knew that this is what was supposed to happen, but there had never been anything like reintroduction of wolves before into a smaller area that you could actually watch this happen so dramatically. So they're really, really important in all of our ecosystems. And they used to be about 500,000 in the United States in every single state except Hawaii. And now they're probably down to, I think, like 30,000.
Wow. How do you even count them? But how interesting.
Yeah.
Why are they vilified the way they are, Martha?
It's really like even going back to Little Red Riding Hood. I mean, they have
The
been
big bad wolf.
yes, they have been used as a sign of the devil since the beginning of time. I don't know how that got started, but they have just been associated with the devil and just weird things. And then when white people came to the United States, they considered them vermin and they were, didn't want their elk numbers and deer numbers to go down, even though science proves that that's not what happens when wolves are around. So they just completely massacred them all across the United States. It's still going on. It's not great.
Wow.
But yeah, there's no science that proves any of the hunters will say there's not enough deer or elk, but the science is telling you that's not it. There's wasting diseases, there's bad years with a lot of snow and the numbers go down, wolves are not forming. They're not a huge detriment to the numbers. They're actually make herds much stronger because of taking out
They
waste.
take out the weaker members. I never even understood that. That's really interesting.
And for ranchers, they take out 0.003% of cattle and sheep, and they get paid for them if they can prove that a wolf took it out, which isn't too hard to prove. But they don't want even one animal taken out. So, and it's upsetting because those animals are grazing on public lands, mostly Bureau of Land Management land that we all own. So it's not really fair. They're not doing anything that when they used to, when they first started farming, they would do things like have a range rider that would go around the herd. And all those animals were at one point, cows were at one point wild, and they knew to gather, be in a circle so that you kept your old and your infirm and your diseased ones in the middle and all the really strong ones on the outside. So no wolf is going to look at that mass and say, I'm going to go after that to try to get that injured animal in the middle. Like that just wouldn't happen. So we're trying to really work with ranchers to bring back range riders, just even some sounds that they can put out there, because wolves are very skittish. They understand what white people have done to them and they don't want to be in their crossfire.
Wow.
So there's some simple techniques, and we're trying really hard, but it just generational hate for so long is hard to overcome.
Terrible. Do you find them to be intelligent animals?
Very intelligent. They think mostly the female is the one in charge, but every grouping is just a family. So it's usually mom and dad. People call them alpha wolves. They're just the oldest ones there. And then their children, and then maybe one more generation of children. And then by the time you're two, you sort of have to disperse and look for your own group. So yeah, so they're very, very smart. And there was an interesting thing that recently happened at the Wolf Center. We were getting golf balls that were showing up, and the closest golf course to us is like miles away. There's no way anyone was hitting a golf ball that far. And they were range balls. And we finally caught on a camera that the ravens were coming. So when we feed them all the deer that are killed on the road, that's what all of them eat. And the ravens would come and take their bones after the wolves have finished with them. And I guess ravens, like, they have a relationship with wolves in the wild. They would show them where the elk or deer were moving. And so they would follow the ravens to it, and then they would eat, and the ravens got all the leftovers. So the wolves, I guess the ravens were feeling guilty that they were always taking and never giving anything back. So they were bringing these range balls and dropping
Oh
it.
my, that's such a cool story. So
So
speaking of cool stories, I really enjoyed reading your book, The Winter of the Wolf, and it's such a great read. I think also, do you find your biggest audience is teens and young people, or does it extend?
Yeah, I think it extends to everyone. I've heard from a 90-year-old man recently to, teens. My marketing firm really wanted it to be labeled as a YA book because it's easier to sell, but I don't think there's really an age group for it.
It's more universal.
Yeah.
So please share with everyone how it was inspired by the death of your best friend's 12-year-old son.
Okay.
And what you and your friend believed about the soul's journey, because that leads into the telling of the book. And you actually heard your friend's son's voice asking you to write a novel. That's amazing.
Amazing.
I mean, and why a novel instead of a nonfiction story? So could you tell us about that?
Okay, so I'll back up and say I really wanted to be a writer when I was a little kid. Like, I just loved reading, just loved books more than anything. And I wrote a book when I was 7 about a rabbit and a frog. And I remember staying up late because my parents were out that night so that I could show them this book that I illustrated. And I remember really distinctly my dad saying, the art isn't very good. It's not a very good story, and writers don't make any money. And I remember that like shut me down. So I'm always like telling people, like, really be careful of your words, because words stick
Oh,
with
yes.
right? And it's like that just shut me down. So even like in high school and college, when I would write a paper and get a great grade and have the teacher say, wow, you're really a great writer, I would still hear my dad's voice was so much stronger than their voices.
Of course.
So I went into environmental conservation and was writing very technical papers. And it was kind of always on the edge of my mind, like, I wonder if I could write. I would really like to try to write something that's nonfiction or fiction. So I've been thinking it for a while, and I had been scribbling down some notes. And then one day I was ice skating and saw this deer that was embedded into the ice. And so it was probably about 6 months after my best friend's son passed. And his passing was monumental in that because Gretchen and I were brought up so spiritually, we just couldn't, we were upset that we were so upset. Like, she was like, I believe that he's not dead, he's around me, but I'm just like, I can't move on from this. And I'm really having a tough time. And, I want to understand this more and what's the matter with me. And then going to her funeral and having so many people say, because she found him hanging from a belt. So everyone assumed that it was suicide, even though Gretchen was 100% positive it wasn't, but hard to explain that how it could be anything but. But I just heard so many people
She
say,
found him hanging or something like that.
yeah, in his bedroom. So many people were saying, if he needed help, why didn't you get him? The guilt and blame that was put on this poor mother, not to the father. I never heard anyone talk to him about it, but they were like, why wasn't he on medicine? Why wasn't he seeing a therapist? And the boy was like a happy, adjusted boy. There was no reason to believe that he would take his own life. It made no sense. And I think suicides are there's even more guilt, especially when it's a child and it's a 12-year-old child. So that really struck me. And I was really struggling because I wanted to write even something to her. I couldn't even think of anything to say to her to make her feel better. And this is somebody, that I'd always been able to talk to anything about. And I was just shut down because I was like, what can I possibly say that's going to make this any better? So I'm skating on this ice skating rink and see this deer, and all of a sudden, like, I heard his voice really clearly. Like, that had never happened to me before. There wasn't anyone around me, and he was saying, you've been looking for something to write about, like, start writing about me. And I didn't even understand what he meant. Like, what am I writing? I didn't even really understand how you died or why this happened. And he was, just very insistent, like, just sit down, put pen to paper, and something's gonna happen. So I did and started writing, and I didn't have enough information sort of about his life. I didn't live close to them anymore. So his day to day, he was sort of a stranger to me. I'd only met him a couple times. But the more I got into just thinking like the messages that I want to give other people, how we talked about how lucky I was to grow up in a spiritual way, being given those messages. And the other message that was so important to me was believing in my own intuition, like it's our superpower. And my mother was really good at saying to me, and I'd say, like, do you think I should go on this sleepover or this? And she's like, what do you think? She would always put it back on me. What do you think? What is your stomach and heart telling you?
Wow, she was very enlightened. That's
Really?
very conscious. Wow, very
So
impressive.
I was really obsessed with that movie, Nana Look of the North, that came out in the 1930s, that was a black and white. And I remember sitting in my second grade class. It wasn't a talkie. It was just like story of this unbelievable Inuit and like how he lived his life, going sealing and building his igloos and his family and eating raw seal. But the way that they were with nature, and always like, if you're going to take something, you need to do a prayer and be thankful about the seal that you just caught and do it in a respectful way, any kind of killing, and always eat 100% of it. And just, it was so great to me. And I remember looking around the classroom and people are throwing spitballs at each other and no one else was paying attention. And I was riveted. I felt like I knew this Inuit deeply. And so I started reading all these Inuit books, and somehow I knew that I needed to bring that into the stories. I didn't know really how I was going to do it, but yeah. So the main character who passes away, he's a big believer in Inuit. So that was really cool. So I had all these different elements and I was just trying to meld them together in some way to form a story. And it was, I was still at the point like, but how am I ever ending this? Because
you still didn't know the truth of what happened.
No. So I was like, what am I doing here? And then I was just about that point when my girlfriend found out, because a boy came to her house and explained what happened. Yeah, so it was just like this amazing, because her son wouldn't talk to me after a certain point, and I got the feeling like, I led you this far, now it's up to you. Like, take it any way you want.
Maybe he was being guided from where he was also to lead you on with all of that. And what a coincidence that just as you were about to have the ending, you got the ending. I mean, that's pretty amazing. And we're not going to tell everybody, but it's worth reading the book to find out the twist at the end of the story about what really happened to this young man. And I also want to ask you, your main character, who's adorable, she's an evolved teenage girl named Bean, and she goes on this journey of healing and self-discovery. What did you base her on you?
Yes. Maybe she was more evolved spiritually than I was, but yeah, that was a really fun character, right? Like, if you had done everything you really wanted to, or like learned everything you wanted to, or explored everything, I really like that. Like I had a girlfriend when I was really young, and we used to think we were witches, and we used to put spells, spells to get boyfriends, spells to do this, but that we just kind of stopped. There becomes a time when someone tells you, well, that's stupid. There's no such thing as a witch, or yeah. So it was like, yeah, what if no one ever said that to you and you just could keep experimenting with things and learning more and more about spirituality and just going there. So I loved reading books about shamanism and seeing how I could incorporate that whole thing into my novel, which was very fun.
Bean was your wannabe.
She was my wannabe.
She was your wannabe. So let's talk about that. You've got, which is fascinating, and you weave these themes throughout the story. And what would you like to tell our audience about these themes and what you're trying to convey with people? The one theme is suicide. You've got another theme is grief, spirituality, of course, humans' connection to nature, shamanism, and the native Inuit culture. So what would you like to speak to any of these or all of these as far as what you're trying to convey to your reader about them?
I felt like I had read Laura Lynn Jackson's book Signs, and that was a really huge helpful thing to me, because when I was stuck, I would just pray for certain signs even to tell me like, just keep going on this book. I know it doesn't make sense now, and at some point it's all going to come together. And I would just ask for signs, and it would just be the most random thing, because she's really good at like, just it could be something crazy, and the crazier it is, the more you're going to recognize it, that it's that sign is meant specifically for you. I just thought that was so cool. Like I just highly recommend that. It's just such a great way to communicate with those that have passed on. And my mother and I like talked about it a lot when she was dying, and we're like, what's that sign going to be? And we decided on feathers. And then the better we got at it, she could, a sign would be like the feathers pointing one direction, or it would be, if vertical, I'm going on the right path, and horizontal would be like, no. Then she'd get very creative with the colors, and I'd be like, this bird does not even exist anywhere near here. I don't know why I have this pink feather. So it was it's just a great way to be led along your spiritual path, I think, if you can open yourself up to signs and understanding that those on the other side so want to communicate with us.
And they're around us. They're all around us, right? And how blessed are you that you can really communicate with them the way you do. And of course, you touch on suicide.
Yeah, I feel like I've been surrounded by suicide. My mother had like 3 friends commit suicide.
Wow.
A bunch of friends commit suicide.
Wow.
And I think, we just need to stop vilifying that form of death. It's just, I can't imagine being in so much pain that you want out, but I'm sure it must be horrendous. And I do believe maybe they've just realized, boy, the lessons that I want to learn here cannot be learned in this body, in this circumstance, and maybe I just need to abort and start again.
Right. There's no judgment on the other side. I know that for a fact also. So if a person takes his or her life, it's just like you didn't learn the lessons you came to learn, so you get a redo in a way.
Get a redo. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And grief, of course, you're dealing with Bean's grief over her brother. Is there anything else you'd like to say to us about that?
Yeah, I just like that word is so hard for me, because I do feel like it should be more of like, thank you so much for giving me, even my friend's son, a soul for 12 years. Because Gretchen was looking at it like, what did he accomplish in those 12 years? I don't know what he accomplished with his soul, but like, what did you gain from having him in your life for 12 years? And so I would constantly redirect her back to that. Like, remember when he did this and he was like, we looked at each other thinking like, he's the nicest human. He just ran over, and he's 9 years old, to help that boy who was just being mean to him 5 minutes ago, but he forgot that and just was like there for him. Like, just all those things that add up to a life. And it could be not very long, and it can be a very long life, but these are souls that were a part of your life for some reason. And if you can just keep redirecting back to what are the positives in life in general, right? Just remembering to be grateful than redirecting off of negativity, which is easier said than done,
It is, but I'm going to liken it to my own story, where so many people, most of the people who listen to this podcast know about my story. My husband died next to me in a car accident and all. And when they took me to the hot, and I got this message, I got these 3 messages. I'm not as fluent as you are in getting this, so it really impacted me. I got these 3 amazing messages before, during, and after they pulled me, as they were pulling me through the window of my car. And when they got me to the hospital, and one of the messages was be loving and kind to everyone, as they laid me on the side of the road, right? On the New York State Thruway, which you would know where that is. Anyway, it changed me so much, Martha, that instead of crying and carrying on for myself in this terrible moment, I started thanking everybody and appreciating everybody. And when they got me to the hospital and the trauma center, and the doctor said, I need to tell you that your husband is gone, I had the feeling at that moment, I had a spiritual awakening that my husband was still with me. And I said, I'm so grateful I had him for the years that I did. I immediately shifted into gratitude, and I wasn't as obsessed about me in the moment. I knew that my husband was transitioning and there was a whole thing going on. And I literally got a call from the assistant to the doctor 3 months later. She said, you changed lives in the emergency room that night. We never saw anyone respond to a situation like you did. So it just bringing up my little piece of what you're saying, that sometimes we don't have someone as long as we would like, but what are the gifts? And I still think about all the gifts that I got from my relationship with my husband. Would I have liked it to go on many years more? Yes, but at least I had it. And at least I had him the way I did,
I love
right?
that. That's such a good story. Yeah, it's pretty rare that people get it in the moment. I was just reading this amazing book called From Aging to Saging. It's a lot about just appreciating the knowledge that you've gained and that you've got something to give back and share with others. But it talks a lot about how religions were, first developed, like very comforting to be around somebody who's dying, like how privileged you are to be with somebody as they transition on. And rather than it being this horrible, sad time, like trying to think like, oh my gosh, I wonder what they're going to do next. I wonder where, what's going to be the next big thing that they're doing. And like, instead of being all drugged up, to actually be with the person in this really significant, powerful way, to be able to, like, I was recently with one of my favorite wolves, and we had to put it down, and I was in the den with it, and I'm just like sobbing my eyes out. And the vet said to me, do you know how blessed you are? How many people do you think got to lay down with a wolf while it took its last breath? And I was just like, you're so right. Like, how lucky am I?
That this wolf was a part of your life and taught you so much.
Yeah.
And shared so much with you. And speaking of that, you recently got an email from a 15-year-old Kenyan girl who was so inspired by your book. You want to share that with us?
Yeah, so she was telling me that she went to purchase the book Women Who Run with Wolves, and that it popped up, which I'm kind of surprised, on Amazon. Maybe you would like this book, which I would think you'd have to pay for that kind of free advertising, but I didn't. And she said that her brother had recently passed on, and she didn't know anything about my book, but she just kind of bought it because Amazon recommended it. And she said, wow, it just completely flipped that switch for me, that, he was 21 and I'm 20. I think she said, I'm like, he's my older brother. And I just feel so robbed, because I had always envisioned what it was going to be like. My future husband's going to meet my brother. They're going to be best friends. Like, I had envisioned this whole world that just came crashing down, that wasn't going to happen. And she said, your book really made me flip that around, that like, wow, I had this amazing soul and he taught me so much. And she's like, now I'm just writing down all the things that we did together and he's told me about and shared with me, and it's just changed everything for me.
That's wonderful. And I also want to say to you that through the book, through the story, Bean is learning about the true nature of people. So what did you want to teach people about that in the story?
I think a lot about non-judgment, right? Because she wasn't as close to her other two brothers, and she really felt their lack of ability to communicate was that they were shut down, and that they didn't even give a shit about their brother. They were just moving on. Like, and when she finally has some real meaningful conversations with them and allows them to open up and talk to her about what this loss meant to them, she realizes how harsh she's been on them her whole life, that just because someone is quiet doesn't mean that they're not grieving in their own way. So she's just kind of blown away about that there's a lot of different ways to deal with somebody transitioning, and it's not always, you can't really see it on the surface. A lot of people are doing it on many different levels.
So there's a lesson in not judging people and understanding that there's more to the story behind sometimes a mask or a certain persona that you see, right?
Right.
There's so much more. You also talk about in the book about how our connection to the natural world can be healing and transformative. Would you like to talk to us about that?
Yeah, so I think, like, if you're just really open to that, and sometimes it can be there for signs. Like it doesn't, I can just go outside and sometimes I'll just need to see like this bud that I've never seen before, even though I've walked this path forever. And it's like, where did this purple flower come from? And then you start looking at it and it's like so intricate and delicate and like, wow, like it's just, it's eye opening to me, the universe that we live in and how incredibly special it is, like the design of animals, the it's just extraordinary, this realm that we're able to be on
I
right.
love how you live in gratitude for everything. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah,
That's
it's
wonderful. And how you're teaching people that. I mean, you even talked about like when you were growing up, you would hug a tree or whatever, right?
yeah, right. Yeah, nature to me was everything. It's like when my parents were fighting, I could just go off into the field and it was like this quiet, peaceful, bigger perspective on things. Like, yes, but they're still together. We still have a nice family. They're just having a bad moment.
Right.
Yeah.
It helped you. It really helped ground you, literally helped ground you. It helped you
Yeah.
move forward. So when you and your family moved to New York in 1996, a very serendipitous magical moment occurred when you heard wolves howling. You want to describe that event to us and how that opened you to your new role, which is your life work with the Wolf Conservation Center?
Yeah, so we'd only been in our rental house for a few weeks when I started hearing wolves howling, and I knew that they hadn't been in New York in like over 100 years, 120 years or something. So I was like going to the bus stop, meeting the new mom, saying, "Is anybody else like hearing wolves?" And they're like, "Oh, it's coyotes." And I was like, "Oh, no, I know the difference. There's a big
Wow. All
difference."
right, wait, teach us that. What is the difference between a wolf and a coyote?
Like coyotes more bark and wolves howl.
And
Yeah.
are coyotes also considered good predators like wolves, or they are
They're
in a
not
different
nearly
category?
as high up because they go after pretty small animals and they
Okay.
don't normally, I mean, their pack might be two or three individuals, but they're taking down like rabbits and gophers and squirrels and things like that. So really need to be in a pack to do that. And I also had huge bones appearing on the tennis court behind my house. Like
Wow.
big bones, and I would clean them off and they'd be back again. And I'm telling this to other moms and they're like, okay, that, I mean, I think they thought I was just the strangest person. So one day I walked into the woods behind my house and I saw three wolves in an enclosure next to a trailer, and I knocked on the door and this beautiful young French woman answered the door. She was only like 23 or 24 at the time. And she told me that she wanted to open up a wolf center, that she had been doing she's now a very classically trained pianist, world famous. She's huge.
Wow.
And she was doing a photo shoot for an album cover, met a wolf dog hybrid next to this photo shoot. She like became psychically connected to her. She was never allowed to have pets as growing up, and she really wanted to do something for animals. And the wolf dog told her that wolves were in huge trouble. So she decided she wanted to live in America. She drew like a circle around JFK because she knew she'd be on a plane all the time. She mostly plays in Europe and Asia. And she found this property in South Salem. And so she hadn't opened up the center. She was still trying to figure out exactly what angle of wolf preservation she was going to get into. But she was like, I mean, we talked for like 2 hours that afternoon, and she was like, "Would you want to help?" And I felt like, yeah,
Here it is. My sole purpose just came right on top of me. Here it is.
what took so long? But here, yes, I want to get involved. So that was very cool. And I ended up finding out that all those bones it was the ravens picking up and the turkey vultures picking up the bones out of the wolf enclosure and dropping them on my tennis court to get the bone marrow out.
Oh, wow, isn't that interesting? That's
So
so interesting. So, one of the missions of this podcast is to talk about healing and why people need to heal. And I know one of the messages in your book is that there is no death and that we can keep our loved ones alive in our hearts. Is there anything else you'd like to say about that?
I just think we need to not be afraid to talk about people that have passed. That it's so nice. I know like Gretchen gets so much out of seeing her son's friends and being invited, to their graduations and the birth of their kids. Like that means everything to her. These are people that knew my son, and there aren't that many, that I'm around that much. Like, don't feel like I'm going to be crying because it's not my son that's now graduating or having a kid, or it seems like people die and we just put up a barrier, like, don't ever mention his name, don't mention her name, don't do that to me, when it should be just the opposite, that you should celebrate their birthdays, or anything that you want, that you bring people together and you start talking about the person. And I think the more that you do, the more they're apt to stick closer to you.
Yeah, because they're all around us.
Yep.
Very much around us. And what is the Martha Hunt Handler personal tip for finding joy in life?
I think that constant that we talked about early, redirecting to gratitude, just when you feel yourself going down that negative place and the woe is me, that you just like, no, like when you're meditating and these things come up and you have to like go, 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 keep going, don't stop here. I think it's a constant redirect in your life that you need to do all the time. Just whenever you're feeling blue or going in a negative downward place, just like stop and look around you. There's so much to be grateful for. Everyone can find it. Everyone's got it. Doesn't matter who's going through what, you've got things to be grateful for in your life. Yeah.
It's so true. And instead of always looking up and being unhappy, maybe look down and understand that you're so much more fortunate than so many other people, no matter how challenging your situation is, right?
Right.
I mean, so I've learned that so much too, Martha. You know, your beautifully written Winter of the Wolf, and it is beautifully written. You are a wonderful writer. It deals with death, grief, acceptance, coming of age, and moving on with life after experiencing a death in the family. It is a spellbinding read that can surely aid someone outside of a family dealing with difficult loss, helping that person to better understand what the family is experiencing and how friends can support them. And of course, how wonderful that 100% of your author proceeds go to support the Wolf Conservation Center. So everyone who is purchasing your book is definitely contributing to our world and to nature, which helps the center fulfill its dual mission of education and providing a breeding and pre-release facility for the two most critically endangered wolf species in North America. Bravo, Martha. And I want to thank you from my heart for this very thought-provoking, spiritually enlightened, and fascinating interview on Grief and Rebirth podcast.
I loved being with you, and I so appreciate all the background that you do before a podcast. It's gratifying to be doing this with somebody that's actually read your book and you already feel connected with in a big way. So I thank you for all your work. You deserve all the accolades that there are out there because this is special.
Thank you so much. I really am grateful. Thank you for that gift. Thank you so much. And here is a loving reminder, everyone, that you can see the show notes and all Grief and Rebirth podcast episodes on ireneweinberg.com. And make sure to follow us and like us on social at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. As I like to say, to be continued. Yes. Thanks from my heart, Martha.
Thank you.
Many, many blessings, and bye for now.
Bye-bye.